this one. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachaline Nirvasisha Sunyavadi Pashtatara Satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. So let me just do some screen sharing. You can see my screen. Hold on like this. Okay, it's a bit better. Huh? So we are continuing reading the chapter 13. It's a very important chapter in understanding the mess that we are in, because specifically it's speaking about the transient false ego. And we began last week by highlighting that, or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur highlights that we have a spiritual indifference. This is part of our disease. And this was the origin of our contemplating enjoyment separate from Krishna. Because to be indifferent, I was just reading before, to be indifferent means, say, to be indifferent to Krishna means that we're neither in the spiritual realm or in the material realm. We don't have a specific determination of meditation. So therefore, we become attracted to the material energy because we are indifferent towards the Lord. That was in essence what we covered last week at the end of our reading. And Maharaj is going to dig deeper into this, into the soul's original turning away from the Lord and then embracing the material energy and the material mind as well. So that's basically where the context of where we left off last week. All right, so we are on page 223. And so we need some hands for reading to take us into this very deep subject. 223, beginning down at the bottom. Yeah, Nitai Mata, Hare Krishna, your hand is there. Thank you. You have a copy there, isn't it? So 223, down to the last paragraph.
O lotus-eyed Lord?
Yeah, but just go up. It says, as a sentient being. Just start from there.
Okay. Can I start, Prabhu?
Yes, you can. We're all eager to discover where we went wrong.
Yeah. As a sentient being, the jiva tries to rationalize his misconduct by speculating that the Supreme is impersonal and not an object of service. With his intelligence thus infected by impersonalism, aversion to the Lord increasingly manifests.
Sorry, Nitai Mata, can I just ask you to begin a paragraph before that? Because this paragraph is very good.
Acharya?
It begins, the Acharya explains, yeah.
Okay. The Acharya explains that the state of indifference is like a, what's that word, Prabhu?
Neutral.
Neutral, inactive condition in which the living entity manifests just the tiniest degree of apathy to serving the Lord. This apathy is the soil in which the seed of material enjoyment takes root. Thus, indifference becomes the foundation upon which the
subtleties.
What's the meaning?
Subtleties means it's very subtle.
Oh, okay,
Spiritual.
subtleties
Yeah. So
of material desire grow. Because of the unstable condition of indifference, neither devotional nor non-devotional, and because of the ascendancy of material desire, the living entity begins to actually contemplate unconstitutional activities from his marginal position. As a sentient being, the jiva tries to rationalize his misconduct by speculating that the Supreme is impersonal and not an object of service. With his intelligence thus unaffected by impersonalism, aversion to the Lord increasingly manifests. In the following well-known verse, the demigods beautifully explain how aversion becomes the cause of the living entity being cast into the material atmosphere. Yene Ravin, meant to say that? Oh,
you
no.
just read it. I can it. Yea, nay, Ravin Dakshavi Muktaman and Astat Baba,
Tamane
Shura
Tava
Pantayaha,
Ashrita Bhavat
Rukrishena
Ashrita
Padam Padam Tata
Anglena
Patanti,
Yen Param Padam Tata
Angrahaya,
Patanti Ado Nadrata Yusmat Angraha. O
Angrahaya.
lotus, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. Thus, fascination with the realm of material enjoyment gives way to a willingness to overload and enjoy. Since Krishna already occupies the role of supreme enjoyer in Vaikuntha, the living entity expects the alternative offered by the material energy. In this way, he hands himself over to the authority of Maya and accepts the rule of Brahma and thereafter of so many lesser lords. Each of the 8,400,000 species of life offer a different kind of enjoyment and a unique stand of lordship. Am I to continue, Prabhu?
Yeah, anyway, it's really nicely written, isn't it?
Nice, my lord.
Yeah,
I couldn't read without laughing.
we have a fascination for the material energy. I don't know if anybody. So, for example, today someone sent me a devotee sent me a video of anyone got that, a seal which swam out of the sea onto this tourist um, bathing gap type thing, and where there's a swimming pool. Now there is a point to this example. So the seal came up, as they walk like that, they walk like that. He came up and he came to the swimming pool and he dived in the swimming pool and he came out the other end and there was a man sunbathing. So he comes out, waddles towards the deck chair where the man is, and gets on the deck chair. The man is a bit wary and he leaves the deck chair and the seal lays on the deck chair. Did anybody see that video?
I not recently. I think I have seen it before.
Anyway, okay. So the point I'm making here is the
Yeah, it is very similar.
given a devotional import to it, a purport to it. But
Hmm.
but the point that I was reflecting on after is that we're fascinated by the material energy, whatever form it may take. The conditioned souls, we have a fascination for matter, for the material energy. And that's what Maharaj mentions here. We have a fascination for the realm of material enjoyments. I was reflecting afterwards when I saw that actually it just goes to show how much even as devotees sometimes we are fascinated by the news, the events, or the things of this world. But anyway, so
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I
yes,
ask, Prabhu, is it all because of this we are fascinated with this Ashwarya Bhav because we see Ashwarya. I think that is why even our controlling mentality comes, and that is where the problem starts. It's just the Ashwarya Bhav is fascinating us. Is that right, Prabhu?
Ashray Bhav, just tell me again what that means. That means Ashray Bhav.
Because the controlling mentality.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what Marge speaks of here. Yeah. Except thereafter, each of the 8,400,000 species of life offer a
Yeah.
different kind of enjoyment. So you've got quite a large variety of ways you can enjoy all these different bodies in this world. So that, and you're trying to lord it over in actually different ways. So we handed, because having the mentality of indifference, we handed ourselves over to the material energy, and thus given an opportunity to express that through, in the conditioned existence, in different species of life, which we know there's 8,400,000. I think someone's trying to come in. All right. Any other reflections or questions on that? It's good to. Okay, you can continue reading, Mother. You just read a couple of.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. The point to emphasize is this: as long as the living entity is in contact with the material energy, this underlying indifference of mind persists and remains a continual obstacle on the path of spiritual progress. As already mentioned, the condition described above is an
Inevitable.
inevitable state of mind. The mind is the mirror of the material world with which the soul identifies. So the mind is also the mirror of the soul. If the soul is indifferent, the mind is indifferent. This truth is nicely expressed by the Avanti Brahmana in the following verse.
Just read the
Ani,
translation, Mother.
okay. Although present alone with the struggling mind, within the material body, the supersoul is not enduring because he is already endowed with transcendental enlightenment. Acting as my friend, he simply witnesses from his transcendental position. I, the
Infinitesimal.
infinitesimal spirit soul, on the other hand, have embraced this mind which is the mirror reflecting the image of the material world. Thus I have become engaged in enjoying objects of desire and am entangled due to contact with the modes of nature. Hmm. Continue?
Yeah, I can just read up to the 4 stars there.
Okay, thank you. This addendum to the interaction between the intelligence and senses, in which the conditioned mind plays a pivotal role, is meant to call the reader's attention to the reason why the mind displays such a deeply rooted indifference to devotional service. The misuse of free will, which is indifference to Krishna, into the mind and gives it an underlying reasoning to persist with its rebellion. Indifference is a difficult antagonist to overcome, but once the mind is reconnected to constitutional acts, devotional service, indifference and its ramifications loosen their grip on the sadhaka. The free will less constrained, a devotee is able to commit to the level of determination required to progress towards bhava. Until a sadhaka attains bhava, this indifference remains a part of the soul's conditioned nature, and so he continues to struggle with this mental condition. Fortunately, that struggle decreases in proportion to the purification of the heart, and more specifically in proportion to the degree of awakened spontaneous attraction. To be more precise, indifference is almost eradicated at ruchi, however, it remains in more subtle features until transcendence. Nevertheless, the mind's indifference is an obstacle to the intelligence as it moves a sadhaka from sankalpa to what does that mean? From
Sankalpa.
Sankalpa to Sankalpa.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you just finish, I can describe. Read up that last paragraph.
We have described an existential workings of the subtle and gross senses with the intent of giving a clearer picture of a prime player in a sankalpa, the mind. Let us now turn to other features of the subtle body, the self, consciousness, and most importantly, the false ego. Most important.
Okay,
Thank you.
so that was an introduction. So Raj brings this up because the overall context of the book, well, it's called Sankalpa Kaumudi. So Sankalpa means to make determinations to reach different stages of different stages of Krishna consciousness or different stages of perfection. So that's what it means by Sankalpa. We ourselves have to want to achieve different levels of Krishna consciousness. We have to actively want to. It's not necessarily going to happen automatically. So to do that, Marge is now describing about the attentive or about the role of the false ego in stopping us from making these sankalpas. Okay. So anyone have any reflections on this or questions?
Prabhu, can I ask something? I
Yeah,
don't know whether
Ahmad
it's
has lots of
relevant.
questions. Yes, go on.
Prabhu,
Yeah,
is this get connected to traumas as well, Prabhu? Because of this, in it, if somebody tells, "Oh, I was traumatized, and this trauma is in my mind," and they say, "No, it is in the body. It is in the body cell,
in the subtle
not
body.
mind."
Well,
So,
I don't know the science of trauma, but it definitely has a subtle effect, and
yeah.
it can have then a also gross effect. Yeah. But in this connecting to what we have read,
Hmm.
we are more familiar with our conditioned nature than we are with our spiritual nature.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, you know, so in other words, sometimes we see that sometimes if one is not steady
Hmm.
in in a spiritual practice, devotees will revert sometimes quite quickly back to their conditioned mentality
Hmm.
because that's what they're conditioned to. They don't have a complete frame of devotional reference. You understand? So if someone does meet some difficulty and they're not steady, then they will quite easily go back to the mentality and do the things that they used to do before coming
Hmm.
to Krishna consciousness, because that's what they're conditioned to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Exactly, Prabhu. I was just referring to this, where I was just mentioning, please, I'm not very, I don't have qualification to say that because I myself don't chant properly, but still, I have that little faith that chanting can fix many, so many
yeah,
things. I have
I'm,
that little faith,
yeah, I'm
which,
sure we all do to one degree or another.
yeah.
We will have that.
So
Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be here. Would have been distracted a long time ago.
yeah, so I was saying, then immediately the devotees, I was little shaken. Devotees reply, "Don't tell me about it. I have been chanting many, many years." So I said, if you go to a hospital, you you have 100% faith in the doctor and the medicine. But how much faith and how much attentive you chant many years? Can think about it. So then she couldn't say anything. Sometimes we think, I don't know about myself, I'm talking, looking at that situation, we think we are chanting, but how we are chanting, only Krishna and we know.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the dangers of not making I say that's one of the dangers of not progressing in spiritual life. One becomes complacent. Say, for
Yeah.
example, okay, so like in the beginning, the mind is going to be difficult to control the mind, and that's only to be expected, and one to deal with that. Now, if one makes determinations again if one's determined in order to, at least to begin with, to let's try for the japa, for our chanting of rounds, to control the mind and actually focus on the Maha Mantra, one will be encouraged. And Maharaj brings up here a very important point. They're being encouraged because they will get a taste from that.
Yeah.
And that taste will encourage one, will give one faith, and will bring one forward. But if someone doesn't make that specific sankalpa, or doesn't make their effort, then how long can they go on with chanting and not getting a taste? Yeah? Then they will become apathetic, because they're not progressing. You have to be progressing, otherwise you might become apathetic and think, oh, what's the point? It's not, nothing's happening with me. I'm not making any progress. Then what? And then as Shradadana Purusha, then one is doubting the process of Krishna consciousness. I mean, that's why it is important for us to make progress. Yeah, because how long can one stay in one position? Say, how long can we stay if one is not at least coming to the stages of anarthana vritti and then ruchi? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, not longer than that. So we have to be progressive, you know. It's just like we have to be going forward. Otherwise, you find, as you probably, it sounds like you may associate, you may speaking to devotees who've been practicing some time, and then not get any results, so they become apathetic. And you're correctly pointing out, perhaps we have to look into our chanting. Are we really putting the effort in to be attentive? Yeah. Just like one time I was, remember one time in Navadvip Parakram, we was on the Parakram on the boats, and we was coming to one particular place, and we was told you could take bath in the Ganges, but they was making announcements to the current is very, very strong. Only take bath in the Ganges if you're a very good swimmer, and stay by the bank. They made the announcement again and again. So of course we was in the boats, and everywhere it was very hot. Been on the boats for 2 hours, and when we got to the bank of the Ganges, the glistening water of the Ganges after being in the sun for 2 hours seemed very inviting. You know, so devotees, of course, they jumped in the Ganges. They actually jumped, but the current was so strong that once you jumped in, you get dragged away. Fortunately, you didn't get dragged into the middle of the Ganges. You just got dragged along the bank. You know, and even there were some devotees there who were quite big, and you could see they was confident in their swimming ability, and they dived in with great bravado, you know. And then by the time they lifted their arm to go up, they were dragged back about 3 or 4 foot. When they tried to put another on, they was going backwards. They was swimming, but they was going backwards. Yeah. So in that way, you know, we have to do more than tread water, because the material energy and our conditioned nature will drag us backwards. So that's why it's, Maharaj mentioned it, like the Sankalpa going forward. But here Maharaj is also given some light at the end of the tunnel. In that,
most importantly, the soul.
fortunately, that struggle decreases in proportion to purification, and more specifically in proportion to degree of awakening, spontaneous attachment. Then he says, to be more precise, indifference is eradicated at ruchi. Yes, one starts to begin a taste for devotional activities, one is not indifferent. All right.
Prabhu, I have a question, Prabhu.
Yes,
Now,
there's another question. Lots of questions. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Prabhu, because
Anyone else there, if you have questions, or please wave your hand or unmute. Yes, go ahead.
I was, but same situation. I was just thinking, how come that devotee, we say, okay, if things are not okay, we need to submissive and see what Lord is trying to say to us. We can see Krishna in every situation, whether we like it or not. And but sometimes, why, okay, chanting for very long time, somehow devotees like if a devotee cannot see, um, wait a minute, what is going on with me, like think back, sit back and think, oh, how much I can do in this situation, like that. Why we fail to think this way?
You'll have to put the question more simpler, mother.
Because this is depending on the situation. I can't really explain the situation because this is somebody else's, or because of that. So I'm trying to.
Let's understand her question. Can we phrase it for us?
Mm, okay, let me try again. If somebody can try, that is good. I'm saying, sometimes we go through difficulties,
Yeah, so let's
and
cut that part. Let's take it bit by. Yes, we go through
okay,
difficulties.
and
Even
then, but we even a devotee explains, why not you take shelter, you chant and you do
even though
this,
we're
this,
hearing
this.
the philosophy, hearing from
Yeah. But
devotees.
still we are thinking, no, I have been doing all this, I've been doing chanting, I have been doing everything. Don't tell me all this. Why why that happens?
Yeah. Well, again, you're bringing up that's the same. See, that's the danger point. That's thin ice. That's when one's in the
So
danger
we
zone.
think
Where,
we are all right.
that's one's
We
in
are
the
doing
danger.
everything.
That's thin ice. That's the danger zone where one might go back to material energy. In other words, one is losing faith in the direction of the Vaishnavas. Yeah, is losing faith in the direction. One is becoming as I just mentioned, the word apathetic.
Yeah, but why, Prabhu? My question is, why that happens?
Maybe various reasons. One, well, we just discussed one, because one may not be a chanting attentively. So, or one may be making offenses to the holy name. So therefore, there's no specific taste. One is not getting any shelter.
So
So
Lord won't help? Lord won't help then?
what's there? Can anyone say there's a quote from the Bible that we could say here? Does anyone know their Bible?
What you
The Lord
sow,
What
helps
you
those.
One
then
second.
you reap.
Okay, Mother, yeah, Rajkishore, Mother Lavanga, did you say something there?
Yeah, I said the Lord helps those who help
Yes,
themselves.
that's the one.
ah, that,
Lord
yeah,
helps those who help themselves. That's quite a deep statement. Yeah,
yeah.
quite a deep statement. So the Lord will help, but the seed
Hmm.
has to come from us ourselves. Now the Lord is very kind as well, especially if one is very sincere. If one is very sincere, if it happens to be circumstantially
Hmm.
in a specific time, or yeah, circumstantially, a devotee becomes distracted, or his or her material conditioning shows its face. If that may happen circumstantially, but if
Yeah,
one is sincere, Krishna will help. Krishna will help in different ways. Krishna may give you some sudden inspiration, some sudden encouragement. But
yeah.
I don't know if some of us might have felt like that. Sometimes we're plodding along in our devotional practice, and perhaps we're contemplating our conditioned nature. We're contemplating our perhaps not advancing as fast as we want to advance. But we're not. But one is sincere. Then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, we're in the course of our usual devotional activities, we will feel greatly inspired. Yeah? Krishna will encourage us. Krishna will give us strength, or Radharani will give us strength. Krishna would encourage us. So sometimes that may happen if one's circumstantially, but they're very sincere, but circumstantially different things have happened where they've accidentally may have a subtle or gross fall down, let's put it like that, or they may be having some questioning themselves. There's a word I often use but forgot it.
Introspect.
Existential. And they're questioning their existential position in spiritual life. Like, I've had that a few times where I'm kind of, perhaps I'm thinking too much, God, I'm not making this, I'm not this. And all of a sudden I get some great inspiration comes, which the clouds all disperse and I'm feeling positive again. I'm feeling, yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel, So that I'm sure we can all experience that to one degree or another. But if one is persistent, if one is persistently inattentive, one is persistently offensive, then they may have to learn through the school of hard knocks. So Krishna may turn them over more, although he's still watching them, then he may turn them over to the material energy for some more thorough shakedown, so to speak. But Krishna, as we know, is always looking after his devotees, but he looks after them in different ways. For some, looking after devotees may mean they have to go through a fall down. I think we described that before.
Okay.
But that's looking after them in the long term, just like Jad Bharat. He had to have a fall down in order to come to his senses. It's Krishna's arrangement. So sometimes like that, devotees, and I'm sure we all may have experienced that some devotees, they do fall away, but then they come back again and they apply themselves with a lot more humility and a lot more sincerity. But it's very personal how the Lord treats one. So I don't know if I answered your question there. I might have gone.
Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
All right, there's not many of us today. There's only 6 here.
Where are they?
Apparently, Jambavati told me that there's an eclipse. So it may have had some effect.
Yeah, but the eclipse is not affecting UK.
Oh, great. Fantastic. So,
really? Okay.
Anyway, we are engaging Krishna guitar, so this is transcendental. Okay, let's do more reading. Anupama Mother, you like to read 225 at the bottom.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The self and consciousness have been described in the chariot, allegory as being the passenger and the impetus for moving, respectively. The false ego is described in another Srimad Bhagavatam analogy as being 2 weapons on the chariot. A question often arises in relation to the study of the subtle body. We conditioned souls are bound to the gross effects of the modes of nature. How can we scrutinize the nature of subtle substances like consciousness? And if we can, what is the means? As with all the aspects of our study, the means of understanding the soul and its connection with the material world is primarily through the Vedas and secondarily through inference. In this regard, Hamza Avtara tells the Kumaras, Sanchitya Hardanam, you should utilize the sharpened sword of knowledge acquired by logical reflection and from the instructions of sages and Vedic literatures. Readers may also recall Lord Kapila's previously cited guideline for grasping the truths of the subtle senses. The Lord advises that we understand their functions and characteristics rather than their being sensually perceived qualities. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Although some bewildered philosophers and modern-day scientists argue for the non-existence of the soul and attribute consciousness to a combination of material ingredients, the teaching of the Vedas are clear. We exist as eternal spiritual entities. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. It's situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, a spiritual influence is exhibited. The soul exists, and our objective perception of other states of awareness infers the separate existence of the soul, as does our objective perception of the constant changing of this body. The Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita teach this logic. Thus, the living entity is spiritual, eternal, and conscious. Indeed, their consciousness is an inseparable characteristic of the soul. The primordial Vedic declaration is Aham Brahma Asmi. I am Brahman, I am spirit. This aphorism establishes not only the existence of the soul, but the soul's sense of self, that the soul is conscious of itself. The most well-known example of logical inference that indicates the presence of the soul, consciousness, false ego, intelligence, and mind is Lord Krishna's initial teaching in the Bhagavad Gita. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. From his first lessons to his disciples until his final lessons before leaving this world, Srila Prabhupada quoted and taught this verse, which remains the banner of ISKCON's preaching to this day. A further examination of the nature of consciousness will help us put the spotlight on the false ego and how it distances us from Krishna. We've already touched on how the living entities who opt to enter the material world are dormant in the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements, pradhan. Therefore, when pradhan is agitated by the time factor, it manifests the Maha Tattva, which then passes through stages of creation in which living entity gradually awaken. The initial pure stage of the Maha Tattva is known as Vasudeva, whose presiding deity is Lord Sankarsana. This is the unfettered mode of goodness in which consciousness is still unadulterated and in which awareness of the Supreme Lord is still natural. Such pristine consciousness is characteristic of the pure ego, the original identity of a living entity. Let us briefly define the terms relating to consciousness. What is the ego? The sense of self. In its original state, the soul's identity is pure, but in contact with the transformations of the Mahatattva, it becomes contaminated and gives an erroneous sense of selfness. This erroneous sense of identity is the false ego, ahankara. Finally, awareness itself, or that state in which one is aware of oneself and of other things, is consciousness, chit. So to the questions posed earlier, what is our pramana for studying the soul and its subtle coverings? We answer, primarily scripture and secondarily inference. In discussion on the false ego, an important point should also be clarified. When we sometimes say the soul becomes contaminated, we should understand that to mean the soul sense of self, the ego becomes contaminated. The soul always remains pure. It is the aspects of the antakarana, the soul's coverings, like the mind, that becomes contaminated, giving the sense that the soul is equally covered. But the self, as Krishna goes to great pains to explain, can never be cut, dried, withered, diluted, and so on. It is the smallest indivisible. What is the word?
Indivisible.
Indivisible, I couldn't see that. Spiritual substance and also retains its integrity.
Okay,
Having a step.
thank you, Mother. Well,
Okay.
perhaps we should pause there. So, any questions on this? Anything needs to be clarified?
Yes, Prabhu, I have one. The soul is covered by 5
by 5 life airs.
coverings.
Yeah.
What are the 5 coverings, Prabhu?
Oh, I think it was referring, could he refer to one or two things? The 5 life airs.
No.
Is that correct?
Mind.
The mind, mind, intelligence, false ego, the senses. Where did you read that? Where was
Oh,
that?
you just read it in here in the middle part. The soul is 5 coverings of the soul.
Which page number?
Oh, I haven't got the book. Sorry, Prabhu. I'm just
Yeah.
listening.
I think it was referring to the 5 life airs. I think it does. I think it was.
Yes, probably it is the 5 life years because once, and then the last bit is Maharaj says about the mind covering the soul. So I just wondered.
Yeah, well, unless I see it, unless I can find it. Because you might have, I need to context, you see. I'm just trying to look now. Silent. Soul is the soul. Changing the body and the section. And sorry, I can't answer that completely. Perhaps I'll come back to you on that next.
Yeah, no problem, Prabhu.
Is that okay? Unless anyone else.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So anything else on this section? Quite an important point that's brought to light here, which somehow or another I kind of find I find myself preaching on this point quite a lot. Just today's class on the 24 gurus, I was mentioning this, and also the Bhagavad Gita class. And what sometimes I think the same person attending my classes, they must think, oh no, not that example again. But the point I'm trying to point that Maharaj brings out here is that we can understand the soul through primarily scripture, and secondarily in inference. What's the anuman? Inference. So, in other words, we observe the pains in our body, or the groans and the aches in our body. Yeah, my head is aching, my stomach is bloated, or my eyes are itching, my nose is running. Yeah, so we are speaking there as an observer. We are commentating upon our gross body. Yeah, we're making just the language itself. My nose, like if I say my umbrella or my coat, that means there's 2 distinct entities. You follow?
Yeah.
You say like my eyes are itching, but I suffer from hay fever, so one of the often things like my eyes itch, So in other words, that's the soul. So we can infer from that there's a transcendent sense of observation. It's quite subtle, but if you think about it, so that's what that is. We can infer. That's a way of inferring the existence of a conscious self beyond the phenomena on which it is making a commentation upon. You follow that?
Yeah.
And that's a gross body, but then also the subtle body as well. So the gross body, we may be feeling I gave the example, my nose is running, my eyes are itching. But then subtly, we may perceive anger, lust, envy, or love, even and affection. Let's put some positive things in there as well. So as again, this subtle body, or the soul is commentating upon the subtle body. You follow that? So there's something above the gross body, and that conversation goes on in regards to the state of the subtle body.
about this picture, the false ego? Is it the subtle bodies looking at the gross body?
Yeah, well, that's a picture I found. I just went online and put in false ego in Google, and this came up. So yeah, so in other words, one is identifying themselves. You could say this person look into the mirror, and they think they're looking at themselves, but they're not. They're looking at their body. They're not looking at the self. The self is looking through the eyes. The eyes themselves are just, I remember we did a gross experiment, which I remember, I can even remember the smell of it now. At school, we did this gross experiment in the biology class where we dissected a bull's eyeball, a bull's eye. It was disgusting. And a lot of kids, a lot of me, and I was one of them, just didn't do it. The smell, anyway. But it was just a lump of matter. So our eye, if you pull it out, it's just a ball. Yeah. So who is seeing? Who is seeing through the eye? It's the soul. Who is hearing through the ear? Who is smelling through the nose? Yeah, the nose is, yeah, the ear is just, it's just matter. Yeah. But that aspect of the self, which is commentating, analyzing the sound. That's the soul. Yeah. Just like some materialistic scientists, they try to put all this perception down to the mechanics of the brain. You know, where the brain perceives this light, this sound, and it's like a computer, tick, 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 and it comes up with this picture. But actually, that scientific paradigm of analyzing interactions with the world through the senses does not explain what is actually going on. So, for example, if you can program a computer, sorry, going off the track a bit here, but just to get this point, you can program a computer or some software that when it sees a red rose, it will print out, I see red rose, I see red rose. You can probably do that. But what it cannot do, and this is very important, like when we see a red rose, there's a lot going on. And what we think of it will depend upon our wisdom or our vast, unlimited array of experience. Say it might be, instance, someone may see a red rose, and the red rose is what their husband, who they just got divorced with, say a year ago, gave me that red rose when we first met, gave me a red rose. So there's a whole picture comes up, you know. Someone may see a red rose and they may think of the Queen's Garden in Regent's Park. And that smell, and they may smell the red rose, and it conjures up a whole sense of what's called beauty, a sense of aesthetics and beauty, which no mechanistic description can actually describe. They can't describe that. You follow that? They can't describe what's actually going on in a simple observation of a flower bed. What they do, it's not just see the scientists try, it's mechanical. They see the eyes, see this, and then there's these electrodes, and there's thing goes in the brain. But that doesn't explain what actually cannot explain, does not explain what's actually going on. Because what is going on is that the soul, a living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, which is very powerful, is perceiving the world through the sense, therefore giving a different commentary. It includes aesthetics and beauty and so many different, beauty in itself, and the whole scene of a rose garden, the thoughts it brings up. It's not, no computer can actually, will do that, can do that, and will ever be able to interact in the same way that a human interacts. even for the most basic thing, like seeing a plant or a rose. And no computer can possibly do that. So that's actually the soul. You know? Sorry, a bit of a sidetrack there.
No, thank you so much for that one, because when you explained about the bull's eye on the table just being matter, and our eyes are the same, and who is the seer, I just got such a profound realization
Yeah.
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. Yeah, who's
Like,
actually is yeah, it's just like the glasses, it's just a material thing, it's a blob of, but who's actually perceiving that? It's the soul. Hearing, it's the soul. Yeah, it's the soul. So this is understanding through inference, anuman. And then Prabhupada then gives often he does this verse I must quote so many times, Dehi nos minyata, Dehi kumanam yorampila. So that's infer, as the soul continue passing this body. So it's already passing. It's already experiencing different bodies from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul is similarly, the soul passes on to another body. So already the soul's witnessing different states of the body. So what's stopping us from understanding we get another body? The soul already has a state of transcendence in regard to this gross body and the subtle body. Yeah. So these things are good to contemplate. And the more we read Prabhupada's books, the more we study and things like that, we start to think like that, contemplate these things. You know? But still, the bodily concept of life is very strong. So we're quickly we can forget. That's why it's good.
Prabhu, I thought I would say this Mataji asked this question. You know, the last para, if you read in the middle,
Vishalmi
it is
asked, which page number?
2 to 8.
2 to 8.
If you read from the when we sometimes say, then after
Okay, yeah,
the
okay.
last.
When we sometimes say the soul becomes contaminated, we should understand that to mean the soul's sense of self, the ego, becomes contaminated. The soul always remains pure in its aspects of the antakarana, the soul's coverings, like the mind, that becomes contaminated, giving the sense that the soul is equally covered. But the self is Krishna. But
That's
the
what
self,
she's asked.
and she doesn't say, the question was about 5 coverings, but that's not mentioned here.
No, she only asked that the soul is equally covered. That's what she asked.
Oh, sorry, that was my misunderstanding. Yeah, okay, so let's read that. Okay, the soul, sometimes we say, it feels like, Madhu, the soul becomes contaminated. But it doesn't mean that we have mistaken. We have false ego. We have mistaken our identity. And we look at the world through our contaminated mind. Yeah? The soul looks at the world through a contaminated apparatus. Yeah. And so the soul, again, so look, is that we are seeing the mind through our conditioned self, and the mind has imprints of likes and dislikes and the different dualities. So you picture the soul here. This is the soul. Then it perceives the world through your mind. Yeah, it's not clear. If Jato Darpanam, it all becomes clear. But we have these impressions of likes and dislikes. So then the soul, it empowers the mind. Otherwise, if there wasn't the soul, the mind couldn't function. Yeah, like when someone leaves the body, their mind is not doing the same thing it was before, because it can't. It's not empowered anymore. The battery's been pulled, so it doesn't function. But when the soul is present, it empowers all the senses. So the soul then sees the world through the mind. So therefore, the impressions of the mind, Marge will describe this, he goes on to describe it like, say if, sorry for my mundane examples, but remember when I was young, I used to like this sweet called Curly Whirly.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's this long strip of, you know, toffee chocolate. So like, so I would register as being pleasing to me. So when I would see it through the empowerment to the soul, my soul is there and the mind accepting and rejecting, I will accept that based on the impressions in the mind of I experience happiness there, so-called. So then that's what will make me attracted to pick up, to buy that same thing again. Because the picture of experience has been taken by the mind.
It's the mind that's experiencing it, or is it
But
the
the
soul?
mind is empowered by the soul to be in duality of material good and bad. That makes sense, yeah?
Yes, yes.
To material good and bad. There's something else I was going to say then. You lost it. Yeah. So, yeah, so therefore, the soul misidentifies with that mind. So the mind becomes empowered, it becomes energized, but it will accept and reject on the basis of its, although it's inanimate. Yeah, it will accept and reject of what it perceived as being pleasure or not pleasure. That's why it said it said in Chaitanyatamrita, as soon as something good or bad, it's all the dualities of this world. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah.
And another question, the 24 gurus you are talking about, is
Yeah.
it the one in the 11th canto?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, I think that's the first classes we did.
Yeah, I wasn't
did.
here at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. 24 groups.
So,
Okay.
Prabhu,
yeah.
here you say this soul is equally covered. That means it's covered by the impressions of the mind, basically.
Yeah. Well, this again, the soul is always transcendental. The soul is actually not covered, but due to this thing here,
Conditioning.
false identification.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. False. I mean, that's why. No, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, just remember. Sorry, go over 1 minute or 2 minutes. That's why when I was speaking about the mind and what it does and the impressions it takes on and its likes and dislikes, you can get an idea of it when you dream. When you dream, you may take an emotion from one place and a picture from another place and an impression from another place, which the mind has, and it gets put together. Yeah, it gets put together. Like Prabhupada gave example, if you see gold, you see gold, big pile of gold. Wow, big pile of gold. Wow. Then you're flying in a plane, and then you see a mountain. Of course, if you see Mount Meru, it'd be really gold mountain. but then you put the two together. And so different emotions that we experience, like there might be an emotion that you went through when you was 18 years old. And that emotion may then connect up to a holiday that you had 2 years ago. Yeah. So it all gets put together. And because all those things that you see in a dream is mind, is the impressions of the mind. So in a conditioned state, that's what we view the world through. You understand? That's what we see the world through. The spirit soul empowering the mind then sees the world through that conditioned mind. But at least when we're awake, we have some intelligence to actually guide us, to make distinction, to guide. But when we're asleep, we're completely a prey to the universe of the impressions in our mind. So like when we wake up, yeah, the other day I had a dream. It was this situation, I had this impression I had of this certain mindset I had of a certain scene that happened 5 years ago, and it got put together with another scene and another person I interacted with perhaps last year, and it got put together. I mean, that's dream. So in other words, trying to say you can get an idea what's in the mind is when we dream. Yeah.
Prabhu, when you said when we leave the book, I mean, when the mind gets switched off,
Yeah, when the soul leaves.
it's still, yes, it still carries the impressions, or
No, the actual actually, you're. I was speaking about the brain matter itself. Yeah, thank you for making that.
okay.
The matter,
Thank you, Prabhu.
because unfortunately or fortunately, when we leave this world, we go in a subtle body. But yeah, thank you for bringing that point up. Just to make so the brain matter is there, but there ain't nothing going on because it's not being empowered by the soul anymore. Yeah, so the subtle impressions of it, which are there, the subtle impressions in the sky of the mind and the heart, they go along with the soul, and that's what, and the impressions that you have, that will take you into another suitable to a body to suit those impressions that you have, or those desires will then go, and the soul will be forced to follow.
Yes.
That's why we're the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We're trying to be conscious of Krishna. All right. Okay, so some food for thought this evening on the subtleties of the gross and subtle body at the end there. Hope that some interest gets thinking a bit more. And so thank you for joining us. Also,
Thank you.
we had a good discussion, a very nice reading. And can someone just tell me where we left off? Because
Anupama knows. She was the last one.
Anupama, you can tell us where we left off. I got
Your
carried
page, Prabhu, page 2 to 9, we need to start from having established our pramana. That one.
What page? 239?
No, 229.
229.
And it's the sort of the second paragraph starting from having established our pranam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
So join us
Thank you.
next week to let's hear more about the mess we're in and how to get out of it.
Yeah.
Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Vaishnavebhyo namo namah.